Gaming demonstrations at glamorous trade shows such as E3 are important for getting players hype about an upcoming release, and the latest trailers often dominate the headlines in the weeks following these events. However, a large chunk of fans are left entirely cold by glossy CGI trailers, so showing off a 10-minute vertical slice piece of gameplay instead can be a great way to sell a game. The problem is though, by now we should all know never to trust a developer or publisher on their word, as even this gameplay is subject to change massively in the months leading up to release. Marketing is of course a separate beast compared to the game's actual development, and in fairness a bunch of the titles on this list are pretty great, but they're nevertheless infamous examples of the manipulative lengths of video game marketing in the pursuit of cold hard cash. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 video game demos that totally lied to you. Number 9. Aliens Colonial Marines, E3 2012. Aliens Colonial Marines. Without question, one of the most disappointing AAA releases of the last decade and maybe of all time. Gearbox's first-person shooter nevertheless wowed fans of the Alien franchise with a fancy marketing campaign focused on a thrilling series of gameplay videos. Unfortunately, these slick atmospheric demos, especially the widely praised one debuted at E3 2012, were nothing more than a smokescreen to cover up the fact that development wasn't progressing as intended. The final product was severely downgraded from that E3 demo, lacking the same detailed particle effects, atmospheric dynamic lighting, and smooth animations. And that's not to ignore the fact that the demo promised a cinematic, faithful rendition of the iconic James Cameron movie, which the final game, absolutely wasn't. Believe it or not, Colonial Marines was actually my most anticipated game ever. After first glimpsing it in the pages of a magazine back in 2008, or whenever magazines still existed, so this bait and switch stung even more personally for me. Number 8. Bioshock Infinite, E3 2011. The E3 2011 gameplay demo for Bioshock Infinite remains one of the most impressive E3 demos of all time, at least until the game shipped and it became clear it wasn't at all representative of what players would actually get. The 15-minute demo, which saw players fighting their way through a sprawling, wide-open area against fleets of enemies, was later admitted to be a scripted sequence rather than a legitimate slice of gameplay. Irrational Games spent months creating the demo even as the game itself was struggling to come together, and Infinite's level designer Sean Elliott later referred to it as, quote, like a piece of cinema. AI systems hadn't yet been completed, so the NPC enemies were being precisely programmed when to attack the player and when not to. And while the final game only allowed 6 enemies on screen at once, the demo showed up to 16, allowing for a far more chaotic and intense experience. The demo suggested Infinite would be a dynamic sandbox in which the player must use their wide-open environments to fend off hordes of attackers. But because Irrational couldn't get the demo running on PS3 and Xbox 360 hardware, the final game released almost 2 years later and was scaled back massively. Though Infinite ended up as one of 2013's best reviewed games, it's clear that without the technical constraints of consoles, the end product would have been even better. Number 7. Mass Effect Microsoft X06. About a year before BioWare's long-awaited sci-fi RPG finally shipped, the studio showed off an extensive gameplay demo at Microsoft's annual X conference, and despite being fairly late in development, it looked significantly different from the game fans finally got. For starters, the animated galaxy map and slick inventory screens were far more elaborate and visually appealing than in the end product. Furthermore, the dialogue interruption system was ditched for the final game, and most frustratingly, the majority of the squad control mechanics presented in the demo didn't make the cut either, while player customization options were also massively simplified. Mass Effect is still a great game at least, and one of my favourites of all time, but it's a shame these enticing features were carved out of the title in the final year before it hit stores. Number 6. Watch Dogs E3 2012. Ubisoft has an unfortunate history of downgrading their games visually from their original gameplay demos, and by far the most controversial of the bunch was Watch Dogs, which was unveiled to rapturous acclaim at E3 2012. Watch Dogs was one of the first obviously next-gen games to be revealed ahead of the PS4 and Xbox One being announced, so players were naturally incredibly disappointed when the final game, released in May 2014, fell far short of that jaw-dropping first demo. Lighting effects generally look flatter and less realistic than in the demo, especially the luminosity of streetlights and rain reflections on the street. Ambient effects like nightclub smoke are gone entirely, explosions and car crashes have far less detail, clothing physics are toned down, NPCs are fewer and more obviously programmed, and depth of field effects are nowhere to be seen. The end result is that while Watch Dogs was a decent enough open world actioner, it was nowhere near as visually impressive as originally advertised. Consequently, Ubisoft's never lived it down, even though they still continue to present over-stylized gameplay demos that don't aptly reflect the final retail product. Cough! Siege! Cough! Number 5. KILLZONE 2 E3 2005. At E3 2005, Sony dropped the first trailer for KILLZONE 2, which was intended to demonstrate the immense power of the upcoming PlayStation 3. Unfortunately, Guerrilla Games appeared to pull a fast one on gamers by actually presenting a pre-rendered CGI trailer instead, but savvy fans and journalists called out the bullcrap almost immediately. The 2-minute clip appeared to show off gorgeously slick cinematic gameplay, which shifted seamlessly between cinematics and player-controlled action, and to be honest, it'd still look pretty impressive if released for the first time today. When KILLZONE 2 finally landed in 2009 though, it was certainly a technically impressive game, albeit one nowhere near as slick or vibrant as that original gameplay reveal. Guerrilla executive producer Angie Smets recently confirmed that the video was originally made for internal use only, but Sony CEO Ken Kutaragi pushed for it to be shown at E3 and flat out lied that it was in-engine gameplay, apparently much to Guerrilla's frustration. By the time of E3 2005, Guerrilla had only just received their PS3 dev kits, so development had barely even begun when this prototype gameplay was released. Yikes. Number 4. The Legend of Zelda Wii U, E3 2011. At E3 2011, Nintendo not only unveiled the Wii U for the first time, but also dropped a tech demo for a prospective Zelda game on the platform. The eye-wateringly beautiful in-engine footage, since dubbed the Zelda HD experience, depicted Link battling a gigantic spider-like creature in an enclosed temple area, while also demonstrating the Wii U's gamepad ability to switch camera angles and change the day-night cycle. Though fans took the tech demo as proof that Nintendo was hard at work on a Wii U exclusive Zelda game, the doomed console didn't actually get a fully fledged new Zelda title until Breath of the Wild, which was of course also released on the Switch. Breath of the Wild also bore almost zero resemblance to that original proof of concept demo, with a distinctly different visual style and absence of originally intended Wii U gamepad features. The final game is, again, brilliant, a masterpiece even, but it's definitely a shame that Wii U owners had to wait 6 years for a single Zelda game, and that gorgeous original vision was never actually realized. Number 3. SPORE, GDC 2005. It's been a whole decade since Maxis' hugely anticipated SPORE was released, and the strategy life sim remains one of the most dishearteningly malnourished AAA releases of all time. SPORE's production was arduous enough that there's even a Wikipedia page devoted to its development, and after 8 years of work, the final game that hit stores was a far cry from what the developer had promised years prior. The game's stunning GDC 2005 demo illustrated a ton of features that were cut from the final game, namely 4 extra stages, including the much-hyped city stage and aquatic stage, a number of powerful editors allowing players to extensively customize their experience, a deeper and more realistic version of the space stage, and creatures that both looked less cutesy and behaved more dynamically. Ultimately, a combination of scope creep and pressure to push the game in a more commercial, family-friendly direction resulted in SPORE drifting away from its audacious original vision. The final result was a disappointingly scant offering where player interest evaporated after just a few hours. Number 2. Resident Evil 7 Beginning Hour. And now for something a little different and somewhat less malicious. Resident Evil 7's Beginning Hour demo, dropped immediately after its surprise E3 2016 reveal, wasn't a pre-rendered fabrication, but it was still fairly misleading about the exact nature of the final game. Even though it was called Beginning Hour, the RE7 demo wasn't actually an early slice of the game at all, but rather an alternate escape the house scenario featuring the Baker house, which would be the primary setting for the final game. Now, first things first, Resident Evil 7 is a great title that brought the series back to its terrifying best, but the demo also suggested an even more daring sequel than the one we actually got. The demo's entire absence of combat suggested the franchise had taken a page out of Amnesia's book, placing a sole emphasis on exploration and hiding rather than gunplay. It was an intriguing hook, so it was a little disappointing to learn later that the game would indeed include a wide variety of weapons, and long stretches of the final game turned into generic scare-free blastathons, especially on that damn ship. It's somewhat understandable that Capcom probably felt the new first-person style was risky enough, but it's a shame that initial demo didn't give fans a more well-rounded look at what the final game would actually be mechanically. Number 1. Halo 2 E3 2003. And finally, we have the most legendarily misleading gameplay demo of all time. Bungie's infamous E3 2003 reveal of Halo 2. The demo showed off an, at the time, unprecedented level of visual detail and cinematic seamlessness for the Xbox. But because the developer eventually realized they couldn't get it to run satisfactorily on the console, the entire graphics engine was scrapped following E3. The final game looked nowhere near as impressive, and the expansive Earth City level featured in the demo didn't even appear in the end product. Lead designer Chris Butcher said of the trailer, quote, "We were building stuff that just couldn't be played in any engine. If you look at the level with the flood inside the quarantine area, that is the remaining 20% of a gargantuan sprawling level that was meticulously built and hand constructed, but that could never ever have shipped in any engine," end quote. 343 Industries did in fact flirt with releasing this demo as part of the Master Chief Collection, but due to the demo running on some pretty strict rails and effectively being held together by a number of invisible technical workarounds, they decided against it. Halo 2 was a damn fine game all things considered, but the restructuring of the game's engine placed a considerable strain on production and contributed to its campaign being significantly scaled back, hence that infuriating cliffhanger ending. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think these gameplay trailers showed off a better game than what we actually got? Or are you pretty pleased with the end product? Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.